The amber-lit streets of Tombstone, Arizona Territory, bore witness to countless tales of frontier justice, but none would be remembered quite like the events of that dusty evening in 1883. The dying sunlight cast long shadows as a crowd formed a tense semicircle outside the Silver Dollar Saloon, their faces etched with the anticipation that precedes violence. At the center of this human amphitheater stood Lincoln Carson, a man whose 35 years had been carved by honor and scarred by circumstance. Once the pride of the 8th Cavalry Regiment, his uniform now hung in tatters, his hands bound in iron shackles that seemed to mock his former glory. Yet despite his degraded state, Carson's bearing remained that of a soldier, shoulders square, chin raised, eyes clear, with the conviction of a man who had faced death before and found it wanting. Opposing him was Deputy Frank Stone, 45 years of frontier law enforcement etched into the lines around his eyes. His hand hovered near his Colt 45, trembling not with fear, but with the weight of a decision that would define the remainder of his days. Stone had seen good men broken by this unforgiving land, had watched justice bend and twist under the pressure of survival, but something about Carson unsettled him in ways he couldn't articulate. "Back away, all of you!" Stone's voice cut through the desert wind like a blade. "This ends now." The crowd shifted nervously, a sea of weathered faces that told their own stories of hardship and hope. Among them stood miners with calloused hands and hollow cheeks, saloon girls whose knowing eyes had witnessed too many tragedies, merchants who had learned that in the territories, survival often trumped morality. Carson's response came quietly, with the devastating calm of a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. "Frank, you know how this ends. Another fight brings shame to us both. Give me what I've earned, and I'll show you the flaw in your technique. Walk away, and tomorrow you can still hold your head high in Judge Mitchell's territory." The admission hung between them like a loaded gun. Stone's jaw tightened as he processed words that cut deeper than any physical blow. Here was his prisoner, bound and outnumbered, offering him an escape from humiliation with the grace of a true gentleman. "Can't beat you in a fair fight? Fine," Stone replied, bitterness coating each word like desert dust. "But I can sure as hell see you hang, Carson, standing there in chains. What can you possibly—" "You forced my hand, Frank," Carson interrupted, his voice carrying the steel of conviction beneath silk-smooth delivery. "Took my money, and now you want my life. A man can only bend so far before he breaks." The crowd parted like the Red Sea as Judge Henry Mitchell emerged from his ornate carriage. Silver-haired and distinguished, the 60-year-old patriarch carried the authority that came with old money and older principles. His presence transformed the scene. Conversations died mid-sentence, postures straightened, and even Deputy Stone found himself standing at something resembling attention. Judge Mitchell surveyed the assembled crowd with eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of countless frontier dreams. When he spoke, his voice carried despite the desert wind, reaching every ear with the clarity of a church bell. "This public spectacle shames us all, Deputy Stone. These men have called me friend, shown me respect. How can I stand idle while justice becomes a mockery?" He stepped closer to Stone, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than any shout. "Release his bonds. Let Carson show us what honor looks like. Look at his face. Tell me you see fear there." Stone hesitated, and in that pause the crowd glimpsed the man he once was, perhaps still could be. His hand moved away from his weapon as he muttered, "A man in chains, talking about honor, seems about right for this godforsaken territory." Carson flexed his freed hands, feeling circulation return to fingers that knew the weight of both sword and pen. He reached for a 6-foot staff that leaned against the saloon wall, its wood worn smooth by countless hands. In Carson's grip, the simple weapon became something else entirely, an extension of will made manifest, a brush with which to paint poetry in violence. "I never wanted this fight," Carson addressed the crowd, though his eyes remained fixed on stone. "These men were my students once. I'm trying to save face for all of us, find a way where everyone walks away breathing." Judge Mitchell nodded slowly, understanding flowing between the two men like water finding its level. "Master Carson, even facing death, you think of others. I've offered you my hospitality, my table, my protection, all to witness your true nature. Show us that my faith wasn't misplaced." What followed transformed the dusty street into something sacred. Carson raised the staff and began to move with the fluid grace of water, striking with the sudden fury of lightning. Each motion told a story of battles fought and friends lost, of honor maintained against impossible odds. This wasn't mere fighting. It was philosophy expressed through perfectly controlled power, poetry written in the language of warfare. The crowd watched in transfixed silence as Carson demonstrated techniques honed through years of cavalry service and hard-won wisdom. His movements flowed seamlessly from defense to attack, each transition calculated yet appearing effortless. Here was a master craftsman displaying his art, turning violence into something approaching the divine. Deputy Stone watched with grudging admiration, his earlier bravado crumbling in the face of such skill. "I'll give you this, Carson. You're dangerous as hell. Got skill, got power, but you're still trapped here. And there's always another badge, another jurisdiction. You might tear down one wall, but there's always a higher one waiting." Carson lowered the staff, a sad smile playing at his lips as he regarded the deputy with something approaching pity. "Maybe so, Frank. But sometimes, one wall at a time is enough." Later, in the quiet sanctuary of Judge Mitchell's study, Carson sat across from his benefactor in leather chairs that spoke of Eastern refinement, transported to frontier practicality. Between them on the mahogany desk lay a leather pouch containing 10 silver dollars, simultaneously a fortune and a pittance, depending on one's perspective. "That silver represents more than money to you," Judge Mitchell observed, his fingers steepled before him. Carson picked up one coin, feeling its familiar weight in his palm. "Every dollar is a piece of my pride. What's left of it anyway? I begged you for this loan, Henry, begged like a dog." He set the coin back down with infinite care, as if it were made of the finest crystal. "It's for the territorial prison officials. Blood money to ensure I won't be beaten into a cripple. All so I can buy myself the chance to crawl back to Sarah in Denver, maybe find a way to redeem myself." The judge leaned forward, candlelight flickering across features that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires in miniature. "Redemption isn't bought, Lincoln. It's earned, one decision at a time, one moment of courage at a time." The harsh winter that descended upon the Colorado Territory that year would be remembered for its brutal beauty and unexpected mercy. Lincoln Carson found himself seeking shelter in an abandoned mountain chapel outside Colorado Springs, its weathered wooden walls providing sanctuary from both the elements and his pursuers. The heavy snows had saved his life, providing cover when his enemies attempted to trap him in the burning grasslands east of Denver. Now, as he knelt before the simple wooden cross that adorned the chapel's altar, Carson reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. "Mountain God above," he whispered into the silence, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. "I truly never wanted to kill anyone. I've only struggled to return home through impossible circumstances. I, Lincoln Carson, have nowhere else to turn. I'm fed up with running, with hiding." His solitude was shattered by the sound of approaching hoofbeats, followed by a voice he recognized from his past. "Traitor Carson, you cannot escape justice." The voice belonged to Thomas Wayne, a man Carson had known since childhood, someone to whom he had shown nothing but kindness over the years. Wayne stood silhouetted in the chapel doorway, his own desperation evident in the way his gun hand trembled. "Wayne, why do you seek to harm me?" Carson rose slowly, his hands visible and empty. "I have no desire to hurt you. It was General Harding who wanted me dead. I dared not refuse his orders when he held my wife's safety as collateral. The confrontation might have ended in tragedy, but fate intervened in the form of two riders whose approach was marked by the thunder of hooves against frozen ground. Their arrival brought with it the promise of new alliances and perhaps, finally, redemption. "Stop, you heroes," called out the first rider as he dismounted with practiced ease. "What impressive skills we've witnessed here. The way you handle your weapons is extraordinary." He gestured toward Carson with obvious respect. "This is the legendary Lincoln, the Leopard Carson. May I ask who you are, stranger?" The newcomer stepped forward, his military bearing unmistakable despite his civilian clothes. "You are indeed the Leopard Carson, Master Carson. No wonder your fighting skills are so remarkable. I've heard tales of your prowess throughout the territories." Carson studied the man with growing interest. "And you are?" "This humble soldier is descended from the great military families of Virginia, grandson of General Samuel Young, who served with distinction in the war between the states. My surname is Young. My given name is Marcus. I was an instructor with the Union Army Cavalry, passed the military academy examinations in my youth, and served as a lieutenant colonel before circumstances forced me into exile." Recognition dawned in Carson's eyes. "So you are Marcus the Green Beast, Young. I have long admired your reputation and have heard your name spoken with respect throughout the territories." Young smiled broadly, the expression transforming his weathered features. "It turns out to be the famous Colonel Young. I too have heard of your exploits for many years." A third man approached, his scholarly bearing a stark contrast to the rough frontier setting. Despite his refined appearance, there was steel beneath the surface that spoke of a man who had survived by wit as much as strength. This gentleman is William Turner, known throughout these parts as the White Scholar. He leads the settlement at Bear Mountain. Carson nodded respectfully, recognizing in Turner the kind of educated leadership the frontier desperately needed. "So the leader of Bear Mountain graces us with his presence. Please forgive my earlier hostility. These are dangerous times, and trust is a luxury few can afford." Turner waved away the apology with the gesture of a man accustomed to diplomacy. "Think nothing of it, Master Carson. But tell me, Colonel Young, how did a distinguished officer such as yourself come to find himself in these circumstances?" Young's expression darkened as he prepared to recount a tale that had haunted him for months. "It's a story of duty perverted and honor sacrificed to political ambition. President Grant commissioned a railway expedition to survey the lands near Lake Tahoe for the Transcontinental Railroad expansion. They sent 10 of us surveyors to carry out geological assessments and returned to Washington with our findings." He paused, the weight of memory heavy in his voice. But who could have foreseen that nature herself would intervene? A fierce storm struck the Sierra Nevada mountains with unprecedented fury. Our expedition was scattered, our equipment lost, our carefully gathered data blown to the winds like so much worthless paper. The pain in Young's voice was evident as he continued. "I dared not return to Washington to report our failure. Too many careers, too much money depended on our success. So I went into hiding in remote territories, living like an outlaw, despite serving my country faithfully for 15 years. His expression brightened slightly. "But Providence has smiled upon us at last. Our so-called crimes have been pardoned by the new administration. I've gathered together a considerable sum of money and am preparing to travel to the War Department in Washington to petition for reinstatement to my former rank." Carson felt a stirring of hope in his chest, the first he had experienced in months. "And your travels brought you to this remote place?" "Merely passing through when fate arranged this meeting," Young replied. "Since it is the legendary Carson who stands before me, why don't you come to our settlement and share some drinks with us? We could use men of your caliber." Carson considered the invitation, weighing his options with the careful deliberation of a man who had learned that hasty decisions could prove fatal. Since we are all frontier exiles seeking redemption, I suppose I'll accompany you. What's more, today I've had the honor of witnessing true martial skill. It's been genuinely invigorating. This drink will taste even sweeter with such distinguished company. Turner nodded approvingly. Excellent. Bear Mountain Settlement offers sanctuary to men of honor, regardless of their past circumstances. Perhaps together we can forge something better from the ruins of our former lives. As the four men prepared to ride toward Bear Mountain, the setting sun painted the Colorado sky in shades of gold and crimson that seemed to promise new beginnings. Their silhouettes against the vast frontier landscape spoke of legends in the making, of honor lost and found again, of brotherhood forged in adversity, and of the eternal human capacity for redemption. The American West had always been a land where men could reinvent themselves, where past sins could be washed clean by courage and determination. As Lincoln Carson mounted his horse and followed his new companions toward an uncertain but hopeful future, he carried with him the knowledge that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not against external enemies, but against the demons within ourselves. In the distance, Bear Mountain stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, a sentinel watching over those brave enough to seek sanctuary in its shadow. For Carson, Young, Turner, and countless others like them, it represented something precious and rare in the harsh frontier landscape, a second chance at honor, brotherhood, and the possibility of redemption earned through shared struggle and mutual respect. The legend of Lincoln Carson, the Leopard of Tombstone, was far from over. Indeed, it was only just beginning.